俺は死に懐かれちゃってるんだよね。上の階で遺体を見つけたんだよね。コドクシってわかる？
どなた？息子さん来るって言ったの覚えてますか？
母さん、幼児だよ。幼児。
それで怖くなったの？
じゃあフィリピンには孤独はないんだ。
そうそう。フィリピンロンリー、孤独は一番嫌いです。
あなたはラッキーですね。行くって決めてすぐ来たでしょ。
Ang bago nating kaibigan, straight from Tokyo, Japan, Yoji-san!
私の日本語どうですか？
ベリグー。そして色にあふれてる。音だらけでもあるね。マニラはここには沈黙は存在しない。
幼稚、あなた幸せだったことはあるの
？Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn Hines, and this is the YouTube channel / podcast where I speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Janus Victoria to talk about her debut feature film, dramatic feature film, Diamonds in the Sand, which I saw recently at the 2025 Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. And this film is so interesting to me. It's a film about loneliness, but specifically an aspect of loneliness in Japanese society called Kodokushi, and it's about the people who have lonely deaths. And in Japan, unfortunately, a lot of those lonely deaths are older men, and that is something that the film talks about. It's about Yoji, played by Lily Franky, who, after discovering the body of his neighbor, realizes that he needs to have a change in his life, and he goes through this transition and that goes from Japan to the Philippines. And I'm very interested to talk about this transition, both emotionally and physically for Yoji. But first of all, thank you so much, Janus, for joining me today. Yay.
Hi, good evening from Manila. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. And yeah, she is in Manila, so we're on completely different time zones here, but which I think is kind of fun, which is why I love doing what I do. Janus, though, you've been working as a filmmaker for a very long time. You have a number of short films that you've made and documentaries that you've made. But we're going to talk about those films a little bit, but something I wanted to ask you about first that I thought that you said was interesting at the Q&A for this screening of Diamonds in the Sand at Relation was that you don't consider yourself a director. You consider yourself a filmmaker. And I thought that was I kind of understood what you meant, but I want you to kind of expand on that because I think it's interesting. I don't think I've ever actually heard a filmmaker or a director say that, like I use the term filmmaker for anyone who's involved with making a film, whether it's the director, the writer, cinematographer, cast and crew. I consider everyone that makes a film a filmmaker. But for you, I want you to explain a bit about how you see yourself as a filmmaker and what's the difference to you between filmmaker and director.
Okay. I think when I was young, whenever we hear the word director, there's always this image of what that looks like and what that entails. And it usually looks like a man, an older man, an authoritative figure. It usually also connotes money, extraordinary success. And for me, the word filmmaker is different from that. Maybe because I'm a woman, so it feels to me it's a more encompassing term. It's not at all like the rigid term of the director that I grew up with. So I feel more at home and more, it feels applicable to me to be a filmmaker. And I think also because I don't see filmmaking as a career. And maybe I'm influenced by when I became a filmmaker or the time that I live in, so it's something that you cannot, there's less and less opportunity to make films, especially since right now globally we don't know what's going, I mean, the structure, the business model has changed. So for me, the word filmmaking is about someone who wants to make films. So whether I'm doing something else, like I have another job, I will still keep making films, So that's the difference for me between those two terms.
Okay. You said that you don't see filmmaking as a career for you. Why is that?
Because to say that it's a career means there's a kind of certainty to it, like a ladder. But if there's anything certain about filmmaking, it's that it's uncertain. So that's why I don't look at it that way. And earlier I watched this interview with Christoph Waltz, the guy who played the villain in Inglourious Bastards. And he corrected the this quote that was attributed to him that Quentin Tarantino gave him his career back. He corrected it as saying he gave him his vocation back, because for him acting is a vocation. It is something that he wishes he could do, but again, not a lot of people will have that kind of opportunity. Same thing with any aspect of filmmaking. I think it is very, the most you can do is you can try. Yeah. So that's why I think for me, it's not, I don't see it as a career, but I see it as a vocation. Yeah. Not a job. Yeah.
No, and I get that. And I guess having that mindset about it specifically, like for instance, using Diamonds in the Sun as an example, this film is a labor of love for you. It took you like just over 10 years from conception to production now to having it screened at festivals. Took over 10 years. And if you didn't have that mindset, like saying like it's not the end goal for you, you're saying this is just one more step along my path as a filmmaker, it kind of makes it easier for you to accept the stumbling blocks and the obstacles that come with it and the uncertainty. You said, you know what, you're like, this is not the be all and the end all for me. So it makes it easier for you to just like adjust and adapt to the uncertainties, especially I would say within the last several years of the film industry.
Yeah, I think maybe that this kind of mindset has been my coping mechanism, because like a friend of mine asked, like, how did you keep at it? And at the end of the day, I think what got me through was just commitment. I wanted to finish it. Even though there are many times when it really felt impossible and I'm very deeply discouraged. And I felt I felt a lot of doubt, and definitely I did not have a lot of confidence. But what really got me through was just the promise that I told myself, I'm going to finish this. It can be that simple.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it, because like filmmaking is a test of perseverance, especially as an independent filmmaker, making films that, for instance, a big studio doesn't want to necessarily produce, or like when, especially, and it's both for, I think, for both feature films and short films. Like short films, to me, I see short films as equal to feature length films. I don't see them as diminished in any way just because they might be 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So it's like, it's the same process of having to find a crew, finding a story, getting it produced, finding money to do it, you know, and finding a cast and crew. It's the same steps that you have to take. And the length of the films may vary, but like the labor that goes into it is essentially the same. You know, you have to have the passion to do it because, as you said, it's so uncertain. And this industry, I think, I've been doing this work since 2017, and I've seen how rapidly this industry has changed just in this short space of time, you know. And the thing that I think is, because I was looking at I looked at your filmography, and the type of films that you do are so interesting, because a lot of your films seems to be about time, you know, not only just loneliness, but people needing to trying to find time to fix mistakes, you know, and figure out what is it that I need to do before it's too late, you know. And I think as a filmmaker, kind of like, I think it's interesting that those are your types of films that you seem interested in making, because that is kind of your mindset as a filmmaker. You know, it's time. You're like, I have to do what I have to do in the time that I can do it. So talk to me about having just that kind of mindset, and like how that kind of relates to your work as a filmmaker, like focusing on time and people feeling like they're running out of options and time and trying to figure out what they can do with the time they have left.
To be honest, the way you summed it up is the first time someone has summed it up, because I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. So I don't really know how to answer. What interests me a lot is how people deal with being alone in really populated places. It's like, look, I think what I'm aware of, not, you know, what I'm aware of in my writing is I'm always trying to look at the inner life of someone, and then how to bring that out, how to show that. But what you just said is also true about, I didn't realize it, it's about people who are trying to like save themselves in a way, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful. So we'll talk about that, because I think that's a big theme in Diamonds in the Sand. But I want to talk a bit about what you said with regards to people trying to save themselves, and looking at the interior lives of people, because that is another theme in your film. What is it about having that curiosity? Is that what inspired you to pursue filmmaking? Just trying to figure out what basically essentially makes humans tick? Like, why do we do the things we do? And like, I'm so curious about what goes on in people's minds. Is that what inspired you to pursue filmmaking?
I was interested in feature or fiction filmmaking before I started my profession in television documentaries. So fiction started first. But at the same time, since I was in high school, I did write for the like school magazine, like, you know, the school newspaper. And I've also always had that part of me that's always drawn to information, to news. So I think for fiction, what drew me to filmmaking is I felt I've always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know which kind. And then in college, I didn't take filmmaking. I was more in the humanities. And I just got some electives in filmmaking. And that's the first time I started considering maybe filmmaking is another way of writing. And it's a writing that can happen. What do I mean? Because I like so in the Philippines, there are two predominant languages, which is English and Filipino. And Filipino is the language I'm more comfortable in writing creatively. But we don't have a lot of outlets where you can practice that professionally, except through video, through films, through television. So I think that's why I chose filmmaking, because first, I wanted to be a writer, and I felt filmmaking is a kind of writing, you know, it is storytelling. And second, because there's the kind of writing I wanted, which is in the Filipino language, I could find a job there in either filmmaking or TV, because otherwise everything else here for the professional world or the corporate world, it's all in English, you know. So that's a good question. I never never asked myself that question. It's like mining my motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting from the little that I know of Filipino culture that the filmmaking world, the film industry is where Filipinos can speak in their traditional language. You know, and I think that's very fascinating to me. And I think that's something also I was just gonna try to think of another example, but I can't. And the reason I say that is because, like, for instance, in Hong Kong, Hong Kong has a very strong film industry, and Hong Kong also has the same history of colonization. You know, where a lot of their business world operates in English. And same in Taiwan, same in some other Southeast Asian countries. And then I was trying to think of where in their industry where you would just hear just Hong Kong. And I was just thinking, but that's not exactly true, because I have seen Hong Kong dramas where they speak in English as well. You know, I have seen Taiwanese dramas and where they speak in English as well. So I was just thinking, I was like, but so I think kind of the Philippines is kind of interesting that way, you know, and so for you, is it, and I was gonna ask this, but I'm gonna ask this now because again, it was looking through your filmography, and a lot of your films kind of do focus on people, like we mentioned, people who want to save themselves, and like you are looking into the interior of these people. But I think something that is interesting in the films that you make and the characters that you have, especially the ones that you wrote, as you kind of deal with people who you have characters who are immigrants, and then you have the local people. For instance, you have like one of your films, Hopia Express is, I think, one of your first short films. That's
It's
about
my first.
It's a very, very first short film in 2006. That's one is about a Chinese immigrant and a Filipino woman. You know, you're looking at how do you build a language? I haven't seen it, but I read the synopsis. But it's about how you build a relationship with someone who speaks a completely different language, not just verbally, but culturally. You know, the culture is a language, you know, and like you have to translate it. And again, that's a theme that I'm seeing repeated in your film. So talk a bit about that, about just being interested in looking at the cultures and how you explore cultures and immigrants in the Philippines, you know. And I think that's interesting because the Philippines is one of those prime examples of how European and Western colonialism have impacted and changed the cultural landscape of a country. And it comes through in the language, because traditional Filipino is you have the traditional actual indigenous language, but it's interspersed with Spanish words, you know. And it's interesting to hear, for me as someone who doesn't speak the language, to hear like two languages completely intertwined in it. And then in films where you have people who are immigrants and learning essentially two whole new languages at the exact same time.
Yeah. So when I was starting out with my first short film, which was about an immigrant from mainland China, I didn't realize the root of my, like the real root of my interest. And I mean, now I can talk about it. And I think I always like looking at others. I always like looking at our relationship with our neighbors, because essentially that's how I understand my own culture, like in a kind of contrast, you know. So, but when I was starting out with that first film, it's because I had just discovered Hong Kong cinema at that time, and I wanted to make my own kind of Hong Kong film. With just, yeah, so I think it was an homage. It was an homage, like, you know, the form of it was an homage to the, you know, Hong Kong romantic comedies that I saw a lot. But the story isn't just a rom-com. It's about, again, it's about migration. This Chinese migrant coming in, and then the guy she has a crush on wants to move out of the Philippines. It's very real, you know. And he was and the lead the guy she has a crush on, the male lead, is working in a call center, you know, like a BPO service center, which at that time it had just been introduced. It was around 3 years old, like the industry. So when I made that short film, so it became the go-to place of fresh graduates. It was it was a new addition to the job market, which became vital. I mean, right now we have, as far as I know, 3 million BPO workers. But in a way, that's also kind of an overseas kind of work, because it's all, so you see, you cannot escape all these relationships, right? Even if you're here, you're not here.
No, it's true, because ironically, when I used to live in Barbados, I did go for a job interview at a call center. There's quite a bit of them in Barbados, and I went away for an interview. I didn't understand how call centers worked until I was doing the interview, and then I spent like 2 days doing proficiency tests on how to do the system. I decided not to accept the job because I'm like, this is not for me. But
Yeah.
but we're Bajans and we're working in Barbados, but the companies we're working for are American companies. And we're selling American products to Americans from a call center located in the Caribbean. So I get that, you know. And then it's like and here in Canada, like, you see a lot of young South Asian and Southeast Asian young immigrants who move here. A lot of them work in the call centers, and they're selling for products for, again, American companies. Most of them aren't even for like Canadian companies, you know. They're selling for American companies to Americans, you know. And that's, again, something that I think a lot of people don't think about immigrants, and they don't think about like all of these things that kind of like works in your psyche, and you have to figure out, like, how do I survive in this country doing a job for people who aren't even here, and then having to deal with people who are rude to you on the phone because they think you're harassing them and not understanding you're just trying to do your job, and so trying to get paid so you can make a living, you know. So and I think it's interesting that you made a film like that for your first film, you know, like.
Yeah, because as I think I'm really just drawn to the contrast, you know, like, you're here but you're not here, you're not really working here. But at the same time, I didn't make that film because it was an issue that I felt that I needed to address. It was very close to me. I mean, as I said, like, the inspiration for that first short film was about this Chinese immigrant who goes to Philippine Chinatown, the Manila Chinatown, which is supposedly the first Chinatown in the world.
Oh,
yeah. And I'm not Chinese, but when I started, that was the only place where I could buy VCDs of those Hong Kong films, right? I mean, it was still VCDs. I don't know if your listeners would know that. So that to me was, that's my world during my school days. Like, I want to watch these things. But at the same time, looming ahead of me is my future. Like, where am I going to find a job? Am I going to end up working in a call center? Because unfortunately at that, it had like a not so good reputation because for your health reasons. Because as you said, the customers are in the US or Canada. So the employees are working here in the Philippines, and it has to be they have to follow the time zone of the country they serve. So I was very concerned that I might end up doing that job, which will flip in a way, flip the little life that I know at 20 years old, as I said, it was at that time when the industry had just been introduced, and it was really popular, like, as a place for young people to get employment from. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me. And I think the thing that I love about, again, talking to filmmakers like you who have these types of experiences is that now that I'm thinking about it, now again, this also explains why you call yourself a filmmaker versus a director. Because again, like what, especially in North America and Hollywood, when people think director and the auteurs, as they like to call them, when you look, as I'm thinking about it, the background of a lot of those filmmakers, those types of white male filmmakers, and even the female filmmakers, predominantly American and European, they don't have, like, most of them don't have working class backgrounds. You know, most of them have the prestige, the privilege of going to like prestigious film schools, you know, going to like Ivy League Ivy League universities, and even if they don't, they have connections that that gives them a leg up, you know, and they are given, and as their careers continue, they're continue to be boosted as authors, because just on their name and their recognition alone, like they get opportunities from studios, from producers, you know, they get the money. And then and the thing that for a lot of those films that don't appeal to me is that when these filmmakers try to make films about working class people, for instance, a lot of the nuances are missed because they don't have the working class background, you know. And so like for a filmmaker like you, I can relate to films that you make and to the characters that you write because they feel very real to me.
I have to correct you though. I don't come from a working class background.
You're privileged?
Yeah, I come from an upper middle class background. I went to private school. I went to a private university.
Well-
But I still had trouble looking for a job because I banked too much on the school and I didn't do anything. So that's lesson number one for me. That's why I think I ended up going in even though when I was in the university, I was already expressing my desire to work for television, like soap operas. But unfortunately, I didn't pass the test. There was this audition here for like the largest TV station. There were 5,000 applicants. It was that big. It was a big business. I mean, soap operas used to be big business here. And I
They're
didn't
not
pass.
anymore.
Not really, because of streaming.
Ah.
And the pandemic changed the viewing habits. You know? So not just on how people consume, right? But what they consume. So
Yes.
and that's how I ended up working in journalism. You know, and maybe that's what influenced, because it became my job to go out to talk to people. Then I was able to get more like an access to worlds that I would not otherwise get access to. Yeah, so that's my background. I don't know how that changes your opinion about
No,
me.
it doesn't.
But
Actually, now I'm even more intrigued because, and then so
okay.
that I do stand corrected on that. I will correct myself. But that actually makes me
Okay.
more intrigued again because again, like, but you do have that curiosity, you know, about the
Yeah.
people and like again, so even having the work of being a journalist, you know, having that experience of, again, even using the experience of having to apply to work in the soap opera industry, you know, that is
Yeah.
not an exact background. Not exactly an experience that most people in North America would even have in general.
Yeah.
Like you're competing against 5,000 people to work in an industry like that, you know. And so yes, you come from an upper middle class, as you said, background, but even then, I still think like the curiosity that you have and having growing up in the culture that you've grown up in still gives you, to me, a different perspective than, for instance, again, what like the people that are considered authors in Hollywood. And I always use kind of the word authors kind of derivatively because I'm always telling people like if they would broaden their horizons and realize the world is bigger than Hollywood, there are films that are being made on par with what is considered the top level films in Hollywood. You know, when people always look at the Oscars, I'm always like, the Oscars are not the be all and the end all when it comes to film. You know, the Oscars can't be the benchmark of success and a film's quality and the story. When I see films from all over the world that are better than a lot of the films that end up getting nominated for Oscars, you know, and so again,
it's
like,
about America, basically. It's the Oscars is held in the center of the world. That's all it is. And the center of the world, the point of view coming from there is, I mean, historically we always have centers of the world. It was Rome, it was Greece, it was Spain, the UK. So whoever's at the top, they set the tone for everybody else. They set the trend, they set what's important. So that's how I view it. And that's why we can't escape it. That's why even if we don't agree with the decisions of that giving, that organization, it is still the most important one. Like reputation wise, and most importantly economic wise. For films at least.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Like what you said about streaming, that is something that I feel very passionate about. That would have to be a whole different discussion, because I have a lot of thoughts about streaming and how streaming has changed the film industry globally, and how that model, like what you said, has changed people's watching habits. Like I do binge watch TV shows, but there's films that I do want to take my time watching weekly. And like you said, like I can see, as you said, like I can see how it would affect the soap opera industry in the Philippines, because soap operas are daily shows and then weekly shows depending. And if you put everything on a platform where people just can sit down and watch it all, they're not going to be invested in watching the local productions from locally made studios. They're gonna want to only watch what is on streaming, especially when the idea of streaming, the concept itself of streaming, is kind of seen as a competition now. How much can I watch and who has the highest streaming numbers, when it's just like that itself can't even be proven, because I got theories on that. But like South Korea is facing the same problem now too. Like so much of their shows are getting put on Netflix, that their local OTT platform shows are struggling with viewerships, and they're having less shows produced for those local platforms, because everything is a lot is going on Netflix. And then even then most people aren't even watching the shows that are being put on Netflix, because Netflix doesn't even promote them unless it's something like a Squid Game. But that doesn't induce other people. That doesn't induce people to watch other Korean shows. Like they just want to watch this one show, then they'll move on. But I digress. But no, I think we can actually segue this into Diamonds in the Sand, because Diamonds in the Sand at the beginning, we said took you 10 years. And again, I love looking through people's IMDb's, because I think it can tell me a lot about filmmakers and their path. And the thing is, Diamonds in the Sand, I kind of see as a culmination, not only of 10 years of labor, but also I kind of noticed that there's other films interspersed throughout this 10 years that kind of touch into and feed into Diamonds in the Sand. You have Encounters with Silence, which is a 2017 short film that is talking about Kodokushi, you have a film, this one is from 2023 called Lucky Sutabing, and it's and reading the synopsis, is on a sinking island in Manila Bay, an aging Japanese man searches for the daughter he abandoned as a child. Those elements are kind of in Diamond in the Sand. When you kind of think of like Angel, she has she doesn't have a relationship with her Japanese father and his family. So talk to me about you have Diamonds in the Sand as your main film, but you're using these other films as kind of like stepping stones in that process.
Yeah, so I think even before those two, those are the like more recent short films. But even the earlier ones is the same. Maybe there's no Japanese element in the other ones, like the earlier ones, but it's still, as you said, it's always dealing it's always about people who are trying to save themselves or figuring out how to make them, like, to give meaning to their existence. And I don't really have a logical answer to that. It seems to me that that's the important question in my life. So that's
What is that? What specifically is that question?
what can give meaning to your life?
Mm.
What can give it weight? So, for example, one of maybe for 15 years ago, no, earlier than that, when I was still working in print media, and I met a very seasoned travel writer who was probably in his late 50s already, in one of those, press trips together. And then he gave me a tour of this area in Metro Manila that used to be like the business district, but now it's really like so run down and dark and kind of full of sleaze. And then while we were walking on the street, he suddenly just blurted out that, there's an invisible line here in this part of the city that determines whether you're gonna make it in life or not. So I was like just in my 20s when I heard that. And it really struck me. And for the first for during my younger years, I think that was like that statement was like a motivating force in the short films that I made. I did make a short film about that area, what it means, and what it means, what that place means, what it means to the people who live there, what it represents. It represents like hopelessness, and how do you get out of that dark place, But as I got older, that statement became less and less true for me. And I think that's reflected in my first feature film. It's like, I don't see life as so definedly defined as doomed, like that statement.
Mhm.
I mean, what does it really mean to say you've made it in life? It's a meme. Like like guaranteed success or what. I mean, it's not just two things, right? It's not black and white. You fail or you succeed. I mean, what does that mean?
And the thing is phrases like that is like when people talk about failing at succeeding, it's like failing at succeeding to not even please their themselves or like their own personal idea of succeeding is more of a, not to be too thing, but more of like a capitalist idea of success. It's more like
Yeah, exactly.
your success has to match this ideal set, this arbitrary idea set up by people who don't even care about you. Like people like kind of, so what is like, what is your the question should be, what is success to you personally? What is your goal? And like, are you giving yourself a particular platform to reach? And then that's when you decide, oh, now I've reached the pinnacle. Now I've reached success. Okay, are you going to stay there? Are you going to keep trying to do something different? Are you going to move on to something different? And then like, why, like, even then looking at failure, like failure again is something kind of like determined by capitalist society in a way, it's like they're saying if you don't reach this, you're a failure. But it's like, but why is that considered a failure? Is that you tried, and the important thing is that you did, and like what's it, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like failure is just another opportunity to take another step. I think I try to remember the exact quote, but it's like along those lines where to me failure isn't necessarily a downward trajectory. It can be lateral. You didn't get up to go that way, so you come back down, you go across and you try something different. It doesn't have to be a complete downward spiral. It's just like, you're like, okay, I took a step, I can just step to the side and try something different.
So from that question that I first encountered when I was much younger, the question has changed. It's not about success or failure, in, as you said, in a capitalist dictionary. But now my question is, what really gives a person's life weight? Meaning, when can you say that your life mattered?
Yeah.
I mean, and the important part there is when you can say,
Mm.
you know. So I think that's part of Diamonds in the Sand, like a big part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's about the Yoji. He's what you would call a salary man in Japan. You know, he has a job where he goes to this company where you're not exactly sure exactly what this company does, but you get the sense that
Yeah.
they make different products, you know, like clocks
Yeah.
and watches and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And like it's in the midst of COVID, so like there's not many people in the office, and the company is
Mhm.
like transitioning. And like again, that's another theme of transition that I mentioned earlier. And it's like he and his three older co-workers, they're like stuck, you know, and like he feels like he's a failure because he's like, where does my life go from here? I'm working at a basically what people would call like a dead end job. I'm going to work in an office that isn't productive or doing anything. And then suddenly he has a very rude awakening, literally, when he through a very unfortunate circumstance where
Mhm.
this goes upstairs to the apartment above him, and he realizes his neighbor, someone he doesn't even really know, but has died, you know. And then this sets him on an existential crisis where he's trying to figure out, this could be me, you know, like
Mhm.
I die and the person below me not know me and not know anything about my life, and I just pass away, no one cares, you
Yeah.
know. And so for him, like that's his question, not necessarily of success and failure, but not necessarily only work, but in life in general. He's like, am I a failure at life if I have a lonely death, you know, if I
Mhm. Mhm.
pass away just like this, that does
Mhm.
that make me a failure at life, you know? Because there are people like success at life is like being surrounded by friends, having a family, and being, you know, and traveling and doing all these things. But for him, success is like, will anyone miss me if I'm gone, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's his question. And
And I
so
think I just want to add to that. Will anyone miss me when I'm gone? And I want to relate it to my earlier comment to you about the question being, when can you say that your life mattered? When is the weight? What is the measure of your weight? You know? And this is a question I feel that has no economic boundaries.
Mhm.
Like, I think, for example, really rich people, like billionaires, what do they do to make sure someone misses them or nobody forgets them? They build museums, they build foundations, they build all these buildings that ensure you will never forget they ever existed. They're concerned about that as well. Keeping your name alive means keeping you alive.
Mhm.
So I think um this is a preoccupation of humanity, like making sure we're remembered. For me, one of the things that I realized in making this film is as simple as your birthday.
Mm.
How do you feel if nobody remembers your birthday versus, if people greet you? It makes you feel special.
Mhm.
So it's such an ordinary emotion, but it drives us to do things, whether really big or small.
No, and it is, you know, and like that is something that I myself think about. Like if
Yeah.
because again, I have a twin sister, so I always have someone who remembers
Yeah.
my birthday.
Yeah.
But it's different than if a friend forgets it, you
Mm.
know. It's different. You'll be like, why?
Yes.
You'll be like, you didn't call me for my birthday. You didn't tell me happy birthday, you know. And
Yeah.
then I also think sometimes I don't call people for their birthday because I forget. And so I'm terrible with dates and that kind of stuff, but I might call them like maybe a few days later and I'll tell them happy belated birthday. But then you'll be like, it's different if you call them on the actual day,
Yeah.
right? So that is something we all do think about.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
so simple and sounds childish, but don't be afraid to admit that it matters to you.
matter. You
Don't be
this is no
not
this is
A lot of people are too cool, sometimes.
yeah. And I think the thing is about birthdays is like the it's like you're entering into this universe. This is the day, the moment that you enter into this universe, and like the entire universe shifts with your presence, you know,
Yeah.
because there's like, you know, like the butterfly effect. Usually when we think of the butterfly effect, we think of it as disaster, you know, like a butterfly flaps its wings here and it could set off a tornado somewhere else. But just in life in general, like a birth is
Mhm.
that way, because like when you're born, every interaction you're gonna have is gonna have some kind of effect on someone's life eventually, you know. And so
Mhm.
you're thinking, I want that day to matter. I want that moment
Yeah.
of my entry to this universe to matter. But then you also want it in the film, like you want your exit from this universe to matter. You know, you want your exit from this world to matter just as much. You know,
Mhm.
like even if your interest isn't celebrated, you're like, I just want someone to miss me. So like the film is
Yeah.
profound. I think the film is very profound in that way, because it's like, what does it mean to have your life just not matter to people, you know? And like, for instance, like I think one of the most profound scenes in the film is when the cleaners are there to clean the bodies, because this is a job that, again, people don't think about. When someone dies, you have people who have
Mhm.
to go in and clean up their and this is, again, when, especially when someone who doesn't have any family left to do the work, you have
Yeah.
companies who bring people in to clean up pack their life away, you know, and clean up
Mm.
the residue of this life. And you put it very out there for the audience to see, like when someone dies alone and no one finds them for days and weeks and months, like their body decomposes and all that's left is the residue of their
Mm.
life on this tatami mat, you know. And that scene was very profound to me, because it's like, you know, and like when we used to watch, like they don't really do it in films now, but we used to watch like the film noir films, you know, like they have like the chalk outline of someone who died in like a murder scene. And
Yeah.
then like after the body's left, all you see is like this chalk outline.
Yeah.
And in films, when we see that, like that connotates violence. That
Yeah.
says this is a violent action. But
Yes.
for yours, in the way how you show it in film, this outline isn't necessarily with violence, with like a violent act, but this outline is showing that this person is gone and this is all that's left of them physically. Talk about that sequence and working with Yoji and the two actors who played the cleaners, because that scene is very sad to me, because it's like Yoji is just like, he doesn't even think about it, but he's like, I only saw this guy for a brief glimpse in a convenience store, and the last thing that I'm seeing of him is there is what's left of his body on this mat, and he's watching someone scrub it away, you know.
Mhm.
And the thing that was interesting to me, because in my head I was thinking, why didn't they just take the mat and roll it up and just throw it away? But like the cleaner scrubbing it first, and that was violence, you know, watching him scrub and bleach and wash it away. So talk about working with Lily and like the two actors in that sequence, because one person is packing away the dishes and the pictures of the neighbor, and the other person is just violently scrubbing away, and the camera stays on that, you know, and he's wiping it, and you're seeing like the blood and the gore and everything coming up, and it's just like getting lighter and lighter and lighter the more he scrubs it. And Yoji is just there, like not know, he's like, what, he's like doesn't even know what to do, he's just stuck, and he's like
Mhm.
having this internal freak out internally. But I think Lily does such a fantastic job in that sequence where you just see like he's like realizing, oh crap, this could be me, you know. And like, yeah.
Okay. So how how I work with the actors, with all the actors in this film was I only just explained to them the world where they're going to move. So what is the world of that room? What is the world of that house? What is the context of what's going on? And the I feel we did the casting really well. That I mean, I had seen them work, so I knew all I had to do was really no, it wasn't a conscious decision that all I had to do was just explain. It was a conversation. I was just telling them this is just as how I conducted myself in the Q&A. It's exactly like that how I talk to the actors. If you want later, you can describe it for your audience, but it's really just that, just talking about the context, talking about why I wrote the scene and what I want to happen there. What do I want to show? So that's how I work with the actors in this film. And the story behind the scene, that the cleaning scene, is the fact is that the whole part is my documentary. So as you mentioned earlier, I did a documentary on Kodokushi in Tokyo, like a 30-minute documentary. Basically, I transposed the exact thing I witnessed, how I witnessed it in the feature film. So before I met the cleaners, like the real cleaners, I had all these romantic notions of what it's like to enter a house of someone who died there alone, a kodokushi, you know. I thought I would be pondering on the things, or the cleaners would be, you know, quite reverential. But I was so surprised that they were not. Like they moved really fast. And because I was following them, I also started moving fast and didn't ponder at all. I did, you know, all these notions I had went out the window of what it would be like to see the to quote, the remains of that day.
Mhm.
But in hindsight, I realized, why do they work so fast? Well, first, economically, because it costs a lot of money to have a place clean. So I think the way they're booked is according to hours. Like you have to finish this amount of hours. And then, but then the real reason, the real meaning I found in the act, you know, in the fast cleaning, is this. If nothing there, nothing, you know, means anything to you, then you don't have memories in it. You know, you don't have memories with it. You don't touch things reverentially. They're just things. They don't mean anything. And when you die, when you die in such a way that, you know, no one remembers that you were alive, no one was looking for you, then all your things really have no meaning. Things only have meaning if you leave them with someone. Then they have value, you know, they put a value to it. So that for me was a real tragedy. I think that's why it's sad, because no one is being reverential in that in that sequence, right? And Yoji is just like trying to get a grip of what he's seeing. Like it's a mess, and all these people are working so fast. And he's afraid. Actually, the hardest part there is how he can show his fear.
Mm.
And what I really appreciated from Lily was he did something that for the local Japanese audience, they will understand what he's doing, because that was the challenge for me. How he cannot verbalize that he's afraid.
Yeah.
How can his body show that? And in the scene, he did this, like he put his thumbs over his knuckles. And
Mm.
he explained that in their culture, like maybe for older people, it means you're trying to prevent bad spirit to enter you, from entering you. So for me, that small action, that small practice, you know, that's small, that's the fear that he has. And he was like a cat there, you know, like trying to fit himself not in a corner so that he won't bother the cleaners. But at the same time, why does he have to be there, right? He doesn't know. It's just it's you're just drawn to it. You don't understand. You know, so a lot of times we don't really we act on instinct, right?
Yeah.
So that's the story behind that sequence.
And that sequence is, and I think that's one of the most important sequences in the film, because that's the impetus for him making this transitional change, you know, this big change where he realizes he has this, not even like a light bulb moment. I think he just has like this internal reflex where he's like, I have to get out of here. And he's
Yeah,
like,
he
if I
just
stay here, I die. And
Mm.
this get out of here is not just the apartment, it's like get out of Japan, get out of my home, get out of this rut that I'm in. You know, he's stuck and he's like, if I don't get out, if I don't move, I will die here. You know, and he's like, and then he's thinking my life will have no meaning, because he's divorced. He doesn't have a good relationship with his ex. You know, he has friends, but these are just more like casual acquaintances he's Like he's not open, he doesn't feel comfortable enough with them to tell him how he's really feeling, you know, like the fear that he has and the worry about what, like my work, my life as a salary man is over. What do I have left? You know, he doesn't have any relationships with these people to tell them. So he's like, that scene is where like he realizes, well, I could be this mark next, you know, like I could be the person that's getting that, whose life is literally getting wiped away. And when you mentioned the grip in the hands, and the thing is like, and I love that you explained that it's about, in Japanese culture, it's like about warding off bad spirits, because to like a more like a Western audience, or to anyone outside of Japanese culture who doesn't know that, it might look like he's kind of like gripping his hands in fear and in
Yeah,
resolve.
also.
So like, so that's it too, but it serves, but that one action serves so many different meanings. And that's where you can tell like an actor like Lily, who understands what you as a director want, and what his role as an actor is to be, and to convey all of these different emotions just using one action. And this one
Yeah.
action, and so I want to talk about Lily a little bit, because he's one of the, I think he's an incredible actor. He's very prolific in Japan. Like he does both acting in film and in dramas. But like he's one of my favorite roles from him is in this film called Shoplifters by Koreeda, and like that film made me cry. And the thing with Lily is like, it's not just his face and like how he carries his body, where because he looks older, but it's more like he has the ability to convey sadness so well, and it's like a really empathetic sadness, where it's like you just want him to be okay, you know. And like for instance, there's another sequence when he's in Manila, and he's and like this another tragedy happens, and he sees another dead body. I'm not going to spoil it, but he sees another dead body, and people who see him run will think that he's running because he doesn't care, he doesn't have any empathy for the person as they. But that's another moment where his ability to translate fear in very specific ways work, because I saw him as like, he is again facing this trauma. This is a trauma that he doesn't even realize that he has until that moment. You know, he's realized, wait, I saw this other dead body that traumatized me. He doesn't realize it until he sees the second body, and he runs again on instinct. He has this fight or flight, and his instinct is to always flee. And he flees because if I stay here, I die, you know. And he wants to run again. And that's again another sequence where Lily's ability to translate so much is that. So I kind of see those two scenes as very they're the same but different, you know. And I want you to talk again about that scene, because this scene is again where, but unlike the first time when he flees, someone actually comes looking for him this time, and this person is Angel, you know. And Angel is played by Charlie Dizon, and she is, I think she's such an important person to Yoji, but I love that she's the person who looks for him, who comes to him, and who misses his presence. There's a lot that happens between these two sequences, but I want to talk about these two sequences because that to me is a lot about what Kodokushi is about, you know, what the Diamonds in the Sand is about. If you leave, if you're gone, who's going to come looking for you? Who will miss you? Because the first time he leaves Japan, and this second time he's running back. He's looking to run back to Japan, you know, but this time he has someone who's following him, who comes looking for him, you know, because she's banging on the door. She's like, let me in. And he's just like stuck in fear again.
I find what you shared interesting, because that's not what I had in mind, which is good. So I don't want to I want to let that stay with you. I won't tell you my own motivations for that scene. I will just tell you, because during the entire shoot, my working relationship with Lily was really very simple. Like, we just talk about the scene, and that's it. It was really just very simple. And that scene is the only time where he asked me a question. Yeah. He asked me, how do I want him to close the door that you described? I remember because he didn't ask me any questions. So
Wow.
I remembered when he finally asked question. So so we were like testing how to close the door, and I don't want to talk about the meaning of that, because for the sake of people who might be interested to watch the film. But just to answer your question, he understood the importance of how to close the door, or what it would look like, what would it imply, right? Because it meant something. And that's
Yeah.
that came from him. So working with him, I really had the privilege of an actor, the privilege of seeing an actor really bring a person to life from the paper. It sounds so poetic, but it's true. I'm just like, oh, oh, I could see it, how it's all changing, the nuances that was put. But for me, acting is really a very mysterious profession. It's very mysterious and magical, like how they do that. And I think for him, he really has a lot of great instinct.
No, he does. And I understand what you mean about the door, because he does close it in a very specific way. Like there's a very specific action and way that he does close the door. And that's one of the reasons I kind of saw it as he's fleeing and he's trying to shut this thing that's happening outside. Because he literally puts his whole body into the action of closing the door. He doesn't just simply slam it. He just uses his whole entire body. So and that's when you have the instincts of an actor. Who understands what you want. So it's kind of interesting that you said that's the only question he asked in the filming. And I think that kind of speaks to you as a director, because if up until that moment he didn't ask any questions, it means that you conveyed yourself as a director, as a filmmaker to him, and he trusted you and he trusted you, and he knew that you trusted him to do what you needed him to do. So I think that's great. And talked about casting him and Charlie and the other main lead I was seeing the film, Marie
Isabel Lopez.
Isabel. I don't know. Sorry, I have the IMDb here, but the screen keeps shifting. Yeah, Isabel Lopez, who plays Minerva. Talk about casting the three of them, because their dynamic as characters is interesting. I can see Angel wanted to get closer to Yoji. And while she kind of has this kind of not distant relation, she kind of has this sort of distant relationship with her mom, where but that could be on account of her age, to where she just I don't want to be around my mom right this time, because Yoji sees, she tells her parents, she tells them, I can't stay for dinner, I'm going to study. And then Yoji goes outside and he sees her having dinner at a street stall, right? So talk a bit about their dynamic and casting them.
Okay, so casting was a long process, but in the end, obviously we got the best. I cannot imagine. I mean, Lily really made Yoji, and Charlie. Charlie. My introduction to her was through the Filipino producer who had already worked with her on a feature film. And I really admire her as an actress as well, because it's hard to I think angst is hard to pull off in young people. And she did that so well. With Minerva, what I eventually learned, in trying to cast for that role, was how difficult learning a language would be. And it was also not easy getting to finally cast someone as Minerva. We had a trial and error process before that, and when Maria Isabel came on board, I had purposely tapped her as well, because I knew her before. When I met her in Busan. When during one of my first short films, and she was there representing a feature film, and I knew her backstory, that she had her first husband is Japanese, and she has two children who are fluent. So I thought maybe she knows Japanese, but she didn't. I mean, she only knew it, not even conversational, maybe just like, I don't know, go to a convenience store and buy stuff level.
Mm.
What I want to say about the language barrier is, for an actress who doesn't speak the language they're supposed to act in, so in this case, it's Japanese. She explained to me the process, how it's not enough that she memorizes the words. She has to understand what she's saying. So we provided both Charlie and Maria Isabel with a tutor, and then they could practice lines with. But on their own, they did their homeworks, meaning Isabel worked with her children to understand what the actual words she's saying means. Because otherwise, it'll just be robotic, because you're just
Yeah.
concerned with making sure you're saying it the right way. So that's one lesson I learned here. It's I really have to, I really thank them for being so committed to learn a language that's not theirs.
Yeah, and speaking about language that's not there's two other Filipino women in the film who also speak Japanese, and they work with the character Minerva at the care home where Yoji's mother is. And that's another really interesting sequence, because this is again where that's where the idea of going to the Philippines comes to him, because he feels comfortable around these women, and they're feeding him and they're laughing and they're giving him their food. And the thing is like he's more comfortable around these women that he doesn't know than around people that he knew, and again, this is where in the film where you show like immigrants in Japanese culture who are integrating to the culture, who are learning, who know the language, and their job is to look after older Japanese people, and so they have to make time for themselves. And I want to talk about that sequence a little bit, because there's another scene in the film, the convenience store, where you show another South Asian immigrant working in Japan. And I as an immigrant, I'm always appreciative when filmmakers make time to show, like, yes, immigrants do live in these countries and immigrants do learn the languages, because a lot of people have this misconception that when immigrants move to countries, they don't know the language, they don't want to learn or know. But it's like, no, like they made lives there, they learn the language, they are committed to the works that they do. So talk about just like having these three women and having Minerva with these two other women, and you can see her being relaxed, but the thing is, they're not even talking in Filipino language, they're talking in the Japanese language, and they're having this camaraderie moment with Yoji.
So first, I want to share that for Japan, you cannot work as a migrant worker without passing a level of Japanese language. So it's really not possible to work legally without passing a test for language. Now to your question, about the scene where the Filipino caregivers invite him to eat. Actually, everything about the culture in the film, I would say it's almost anthropological for me. Because that's really how we behave with strangers. We really, like, for example, I'm in the street here and I'm passing maybe a security guard in a building eating his lunch, like, it's his lunch break. If we make eye contact, even if I don't know him, he'll say, "Let's eat." I mean, that's a complete stranger. All the more with Yoji, right? Who arrives in the scene introduced by a friend of theirs, Minerva. So it's genuine that they would ask someone to join them to eat. And apparently this is not other cultures also do this, like Chinese. I found this, there's this whole book done by a documentary filmmaker from Canada, I think. The title of his book is Have You Eaten? And it's about all the backstories of all his documentaries all over the world where he eats in a Chinese restaurant, whether it's in South America. So the value of the question, have you eaten, is also important. And for me at the start, it was just a sociological or a behavioral, part of the script. And then I realized later on how much meaning it has on existence. It's acknowledging you, right? So maybe,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
that's
go
the
ahead, go
start
ahead.
for him. No, I think that's the start for him, that even because the thing with the character of Yoji is I purposely um he is someone who is not yet aware of what he's doing. He's just going with the flow. He's just trying to escape a situation. So the meaning of all the things that he was encountering, like the actions, the activities that he suddenly finds himself involved in, he doesn't realize immediately the meaning of those things or the value of them till much later on. He's just, when you're trying to escape, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Because
how you behave.
yeah, because he's operating on instinct. And
Yeah.
again, like I mentioned, like he flees the house, and there's an importance in, to me, of Angel coming to look for him and coming after him. But again, there's like this significance of people wanting to feed him, and like these women asking, have you eaten? And then there's another later instance when Minerva asked him the same question, and it's about, and they have a conversation about that, about have you eaten? And it's about someone showing that they're interested in your well-being. They care, that to they care enough to want to feed you, because to want to feed someone means that you want them to be well, like
Yeah.
you're giving them sustenance, you're giving them food and energy. And like sharing food is such an important aspect of so many different cultures, where this is how you show that you care for someone, like it's giving food is a love language. And
Yes.
and giving it to people that you don't even know.
Acknowledge your existence,
Right.
random stranger. Yeah.
Right, instead of just walking past them. So like for me, like something that I do, I have my purse, and I try to keep physical money in my purse, because everyone has like credit cards and stuff now. I keep change in my purse, because I use it to give to like people on the street. And that was something that I decided a few years ago. I want to keep physical money in my purse, that if I can afford it, that I can give at least a few dollars to someone. Because like I don't want, because the reason it came to me is because I remember I read this article where someone was talking about how people who are on house, homeless people, like they feel invisible, because so many people are walking past when no one is acknowledging them, and I kind of see like that whole issue with is repeated in this film, where like you want someone to acknowledge your existence, and you don't want people to pass you by. You don't want you disappearing to not have some kind of meaning. And so I kind of related. I love that the film is essentially about them. It's about acknowledging people's existence, at ground level. That's what the film is. It's like people saying to each other, I see you and you matter, and I won't let you just disappear. I won't let your presence be just a mark on a map, like you're gonna have an impression on me, like there's a motif in the film with regards to pictures, where with physical pictures, and to me the importance of having physical pictures. So my last question, I want to ask you about that, about having the importance of people keeping physical pictures as mementos of people, because film itself is a momentum, it's a memento of the process of making a film, of these stories being told. But I think for a lot of us, and I was having this conversation with some other filmmakers just yesterday, we were talking about how people are documenting their own lives now using phones, like we vlog and we post pictures and stuff. And so I wanted to ask you about that, about the importance of pictures, of actual pictures for you, and like how that plays into the film.
I'm sure you've heard of this saying, out of sight, out of mind. um that's what physical things are. You cannot, unless you really hide them, they're in front of you, you will see them. That's what, versus things that are in your phone, because the only thing you see is your phone. Unless you really go into all your photos on Instagram or Facebook or or other things, they will be out of your mind. That's why there's this term like doom scroll, right? Nothing stays behind your mind for more than, I don't know, 5 seconds. Whereas something physical is something you can stare at and get lost in. Meaning get lost in one thing, not get lost literally just like in a flash. It's a very different experience, right? So I'm not saying that the virtual world is not real, because it is. I mean, that's where we are right now, the two of us. But what the physical world allows us to do is, for example, a printed photo will allow you to focus on one thing. It allows you to see, and it gives, you were saying earlier, the acknowledgement of the existence. It's really, you're asking to be seen. You're hoping to be seen. And that's not going to be possible if, through the experience of all the information and data in the internet or in your phone, versus in the physical world, right? Where the feeling of being seen feels more authentic and real. And there's no other explanation to that, why it feels that way. I mean, you just do, right? That's what physical means, or that's what having a physical object, that's the value for us, at least as of our speaking time now. Who knows in the future if the value system of human beings will change, right?
No,
Yeah.
I understand, because holding a picture in your hand is different to holding it in your phone.
Yeah.
Because you said, like, you can scroll up, move on past the picture, like, that was
Yeah.
nice. Scroll, keep moving. But if you have a picture in your hand, you're kind of more inclined to stop and look at it and really I really think about it. So like that's something that I really love about the film, like the importance you place on pictures and people having pictures to like leave behind. So we'll wrap up here, but is there anything that perhaps you'd like to say about the film or about your filmmaking, that making that now that this film has come to fruition and you've done all the film festivals, that has maybe something that occurred to you in the process of like maybe doing the screenings and the Q&A that perhaps that hadn't occurred to you even throughout the 10 years of making this film, that you were like, you know what?
Okay. So there's been a lot of focus on how long I've made, how long it took me to make this film. So the actual making is 10 years, meaning from concept to the actual shoot. Just the shoot, not yet the editing. But last month, I was in London. The film was part of the London Film Festival in the first film category. And during one of the filmmaker lunches that they held, the programmer who told me, they championed our film, she introduced me to another filmmaker from Taiwan. And she said it took her 20 years to make her film. And of course, that's like an instant bond. Like, let's talk about that. So she did a documentary, right? And it took her 20 years. She started when she was 20 years old. So it's like she built an entire profession alongside while trying to make that documentary. It sounded very familiar because I have a whole other profession, And when we sat down to talk, what she said really resonated in me. She said that I could not have finished or made that film when I was younger. She has she had to have life experience because she did a documentary on the leper colony in Taiwan. And the residents there, they've been living there since the 50s. So can you imagine? They're very old. And this, in the same manner, my subject matter is about death and dying and aging. And both of us started our projects when we were young. And now we realize it's also necessary to grow up with the film because the subject matter needed life experience to be understood. When I was starting the film, Kodokushi is a very sensational news subject, right? Because it's about people who die and they're only discovered once they start decomposing. That's very sensational. And maybe if I didn't grow up, if the years didn't happen, or I might have treated it that way, just in the surface level. Not the life experience teaches us how to look at the nuances of things. So that's what I feel what we were able to utilize, the understanding of the nuances is what I feel both of us, because I watched her film, what both of us were able to put in our works. And the nuances is more important than the events, because this is very much a life, I mean, an interior life of someone, right? Diamonds in the Sand is very much the interior life of Yoji. And it's hard to show that visually, externally. If you don't, it's all about nuances. So I think there are stories that require the storytellers years, and maybe there are stories that don't require as much growing up to be able to make. For me, it was that. This was trying to make this film is my film school. It's my film school and also my life school.
No, and I love that. I'm
Yeah.
interested now to see about this film that took 20 years to make.
Yeah.
And I love that, because you took your time and the time was needed and necessary. And that kind of touches back on what we were discussing before about like the life experiences, like being interested in people's interior lives and what makes them want to save themselves, how do you adjust to moving to a new country where people are speaking a completely different language, working in an industry that you're there but you're not really there, so all of these things kind of tie in, and I can see that in this film. Like the film has the maturity to it, but also the nuances, all these little details that come out and that would not have been there if you didn't take the time to do it and gather the experiences from the other films that you made, and from having, as you said, a job that is not filmmaking, it lends to that as well. So but thank you so much, Janus, for taking the time for talking. My congratulations to you and the cast and crew on this film. Like, I love this film genuinely, and I love the karaoke references because I love karaoke, so I appreciated that sequence. But congratulations, and thank you for taking the time for speaking with me today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yay.